I met a Gypsy.
Starting the company. And then, so he started in 74. I was 6 years old. Greg was like 8. And the early days, it's just a kind of, it was an extension of like a family experience because we would be at home or we'd be at school or we'd be at the office, you know, tinkering around. Greg and I would do odd jobs. My dad would like keep us busy by like doing something. There was one thing he would pay us a penny for taking apart like grips and stuff. And so we'd come in there and do odd jobs. But it just all felt like, you know, my memory of that is that the feeling was, this is all my life and this is all the family.
Yeah.
There was no like hard line separating the two. And the people that worked at the company at the time were like an extension of the family. And my parents would, for the company Christmas parties, they'd have everyone come over to the house, you know, small little thing. There was like a dozen people or something. And so it was I'm so grateful for that. And it's such an important part of the experience, the history of Fox, is that it started like that. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to make this, you know, my dad wasn't some executive who said, oh, I've got an idea to how to make $100 million company and I'm going to go do that. It was like, I love motocross and it was all organic, you know?
And making the thing that he wished he had,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So in the early days, he was such a hardcore fan, such an enthusiast of the sport, and it was just starting out. And so he said his strength was that he would, you know, be at the track or whatever, and he'd see, oh, that guy has some really cool gloves, or that guy's got a cool shock or whatever. And he was such a nerd about it that he'd come up with, oh, I'm going to figure out where you buy those gloves and I'll sell it to other people. And so he was like, it was like a business hobby almost, you know? He was just finding cool stuff and then selling it.
Yeah.
And the other story I love is, it's just so long ago that to get a mailing list of dealers in the country, him and my mom went to the local library, and would go through the yellow pages of, look up motorcycle dealers for each like state or whatever, and they would look up, oh, here's a motorcycle dealer, and they would write it down, and then they'd start sending. We made catalogs,
Little Rolodex cards with all the dealers.
Fuck, I don't know where they stored it all, but yeah, it was all manual. And then we made these catalogs. We made them in the garage. My dad would bring home boxes of Xerox pages, put them around the garage, starting at 1 and ending at 100 or however many pages it was. And I'm 6 or 7 years old, and we'd go pay, each box, take page number 1, number 2, all the way around the room, and then staple it, and then start over. And that's like the early days of Fox. And again, it's, what's so cool about it for me was that it was just, oh, this is what we're doing as a family. It wasn't even a business. It was just, wash the dishes and then go build a catalog, It was just, this is the stuff we're doing.
And I think that there's a lot of, especially back then, I think it's so much harder these days to make a business like that. There's just so much more to navigate, and especially to get to the kind of scale that Fox got to and is at now. But I mean, you kind of just you're just living through your passion,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's one of the things, is motocross especially, but there's so many sports or, hobbies that are like, I'm sure people in bow hunting and like the great big bow, I don't know anything about it, but like Hoyt's bows or whatever was probably the same, and like skiing companies. And, there's so many of these companies where these people just, that was their life and they didn't want to work. They wanted to go snowboarding and make things better for themselves. And it just becomes this organic progression, and you end up living your life through your passion. You don't necessarily have this like, okay, I work for these hours and then on X days on the weekend I go and do my passion, then my life. Like, you don't have the separation in life. You just kind of have this one big evolving like lifestyle through your passion.
Yeah. And that definitely, from what I know, the other motocross brands at that time, a lot of their stories are similar, and the surf companies, Quicksilver and those guys, it's similar. It's just like people that loved some sport, and they saw an opportunity and just started it without the idea that it was ever going to be some massive business.
Yeah, you just end up wanting to, first Quicksilver. I just want to surf Bells Beach every day.
Yeah.
Torquay becomes the spot where, Rip Curl and Quicksilver started and turned out to be, like you said, $100 billion companies.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. So then, if we're going chronologically, you want to do that?
Yeah.
So then at some point, I started helping, every summer or whatever, my brother and I would get moved to a different department, where one summer we're helping in the shipping department, one summer we're in the receiving. We're like 10 years old or 12 years old. I think my dad was just doing it to keep us, busy. The other employees would babysit us or whatever. And then some days we were working in the shocks, like building shocks. Like my brother and I built like air shocks, and forks and stuff when we were, I don't know, was I 14 or 12 or something like that?
So the Fox Racing shocks that exist now, is that an offshoot of your dad's company?
So, yeah, in a way. So my dad started.
I didn't know that either.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Yeah, that's my uncle. So so my dad started Fox, the Motocross Fox, and then my dad came up with original oil and spring shock absorber. It wasn't revolutionary. He just made one that was maybe better than, because they would blow out a lot at that time. And so originally my dad made a rebuild kit. He was selling Coney shocks, Coney shocks.
Yeah.
So my dad, through Fox, was, like I said, he would sell somebody's glove and a shock and all these things. And Coney shocks at the time were the best, but they need to be rebuilt. And so my dad came up with his first product, I think, was this rebuild kit for shock absorber for Coney shocks. The story he's told is that the guys at Coney found out that he had made a rebuild kit for the shock, and they got pissed because it indicated that the shocks
weren't that great.
Yeah. So they stopped selling shocks to him. So my dad,
which ruined his business.
Yeah, and so he's like, well, screw that, I'm going to build my own shock then. And so out of that desperation, my dad I'm going to make my own shock. Fox shock and red, white, and blue. And so he made the original Fox shock. You could look it up. Nothing too special, but a good shock, and popular enough. And then my uncle, who was an engineer by background and a professional gambler at the time, literally a professional.
How do you be a professional gambler at that time?
Playing poker. My uncle was a professional poker player. That's how he made his money.
No way.
Yeah. He started as an engineer, and then he was a single guy, and he started gambling or playing poker at night, and pretty soon he was making more money playing poker than...
Was he counting cards? Like he was that kind of like...
not
was that
counting.
I guess that's more of a blackjack thing.
I think that's more blackjack.
Yeah. But he was obviously smart enough to kind of...
Yeah, and good at it and loved it. And so he started making more money at that, and so he quit his job, and he became this poker player. And now, that's a real thing. But at the time, so my uncle's doing that and riding dirt bikes with my dad, and then my dad made this shock absorber, and then my uncle, as an engineer, got intrigued. Oh, yeah, shock absorber. That's like up my uncle's alley as an engineer. And so he started, he came up with his concept. I've never heard that story. That's a good story I should find out about. He came up with the idea for the original air shock, the Fox air shock.
Yeah.
So he came and worked for my dad at Fox, came up with the idea for the air shock, and they started selling the air shock. And so it was all underneath the umbrella of my dad's company at the time. And then after a little while, after a year or two, my uncle said, the shock thing's cool. I'm going to start my own company. I'll be across the parking lot. Literally, it was across the parking lot. I'm going to sell shocks to other people, and everything was great. And that's my uncle's company. It's the Shock Absorbers, which has gone on to be...
It's massive, a behemoth.
Massive, yeah.
And he still runs it?
No, it's a public company. And my uncle,
really?
Yeah, he sold a big part of it, and then it turned into a public company. I think my uncle still owns some shares of it, but he's essentially retired. I think he does some engineering for them still.
Yeah.
But, that's...
What a fascinating family. It's like almost like the first family of motocross.
It's a pretty cool. It's a cool, bizarre, winding road of
and an incredible way to grow up.
Yeah.
Like the education that you must have got in those early years. I mean, I'm sure it just kind of hasn't really stopped, but that's just a really incredible way to grow up and to get a real life education.
Very, very lucky. Very lucky that my parents had us so included.
Yeah.
Right? It could have been real easy, like, oh, this is the family, this is my business or whatever. And
this is serious, kids.
This is serious. And you guys, go to your school and then go have daycare or something like that. And we could have been like easily, separated from it. But it was like Greg and I in there building shocks, we'd learned how to like assemble things. And I remember one of my favorite things was at the end of the process, you would take this completed shock absorber, stick it in a bucket of water, and wait a little while and see if any bubbles come out.
Yeah.
And if no bubbles came out, then you put it, okay, that one's good.
This one's fine. Yeah, it's sealed up.
That was my job at 12 years old or something. So the shock absorber thing blew up, right? It was huge. And so my dad decided, we're going to form a race team, sponsor some guys, and we'll form a race team to sell shocks, to promote the shock absorbers. And so to make the race team look like an official team, he made gear, a couple sets of gear for the guys, right? And that's the classic, Motocross Fox original, was just to promote the shock absorbers and that whole side of the business. And he said after a few races, people calling up and saying, hey, can I buy that gear? That gear's cool. I want to buy the gear. My dad's like, maybe we should start selling some gear. And so that's so it wasn't even the original idea. The original idea was shock absorbers.
Wow. That is so insane. And to think of what that did to the industry, that changed everything.
It was awesome.
If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. And to listen to the full 3-hour podcast, search Gypsy Tales in your favorite podcast platform or click the link in the description below. Gypsy Gang.